Okay.
So that could, from a certain perspective, that could be seen as an organizing principle.
What philosophers are you talking about?
Well, go back to Plato for one, right?
Uh-huh.
So,
okay, the idea of forms.
Goodness, yeah, it forms. So he's speculating that these are alternative, organizing principles that are fundamental to the cosmos, right? Goodness, truth, and beauty.
But time and beauty seem to be very different in terms of. I can't figure out how to anything makes sense if there's no time. Because everything that I understand about myself, I can make sense of a universe where beauty matters as an organizing principle, but I don't see how that substitutes for time in my understanding of what happens after death. Maybe that's the problem with death. The reason we don't understand it is because we go from time to non-time.
Right.
How do we understand non-time?
Yeah.
I mean, how would we understand non-time in the way that you're talking about, Steve, as an organizing principle?
Well, lack thereof. It's hard to say because our brains evolved, in a Western society with the linear idea of time. So it makes me wonder: are there non-Western societies that don't have the same different theories or experiences of death and the afterlife?
Well, you do know this because of the circular nature of some of the. Like you went to the conference?
Oh, yeah. So, for example, in many Native American traditions, when they go into ceremony, they enter, a realm which exists outside of time. I mean, they actually, believe that, or, we can speculate they actually experience that. So it may be possible to actually experience phenomena which exist outside time. Death may be one of those phenomena.
Well, I mean, isn't that equivalent to being... is that equivalent to being in a concentrated state, for instance? One of the Buddhist jhanic states, where you're so identified with the object of your attention that everything else around you comes to a stop.
Right.
But I that's how I envision the lack of time. And to me, that means the after-death world is a world where everyone sits around and is in their own little world. Because if you have events, if you have actions, then you have time, right? Of some sort.
Right.
If there's any change in what's happening around you or in you, then there's time, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So you say absolute stillness equals no time.
Except, I know that we've had this conversation. Steve and I have had this conversation before, and it has to do with. You might remember what the science is behind this, or who it came from, is that every moment is now, right? So past, present, future is all happening at the same time, based on something that has to do with the speed of light, right?
Yeah, time stops at the speed of light.
Time stopped at the speed of light.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but then there was something that had to do with photons. And this particular phenomenon.
Right, photons exist outside of time. They don't experience time.
So photons don't experience time, and how we see, so what is the connection between us as human organisms and the photonic world around us?
Well, I mean, the photonic world is one way that we interact with the physical world. Right? Light is the messenger of the universe. And that's an interesting other discussion, is that, the soul as often being associated with light, or the heavenly realms. So if the soul is made out of pure light, then it can exist as part of this physical realm, and yet also be of a realm that's completely different from it, a realm that exists outside of time.
That makes good sense. That makes sense to me, that because the photon's never destroyed, right?
Right.
It can't go any fast. It can't speed up. It can't slow down. I guess it can slow down, right?
Yeah, they can slow them down in, certain laboratory conditions.
But typically, out in the wild, they're...
Out in the wild? Well,
those wild photons.
well, they slow down when they enter a different medium, say water or glass.
Is that why then it looks distorted? Or is that just our perception of it?
Well, yeah, that's the refraction of photons, which involves slowing them down.
Okay, so the refraction has to do with the photons slowing down.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Okay. Just want to be clear on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So are photons capable of acting as a unit, or do they all go their each individual way?
Well, it's tricky here because we're talking about quantum phenomena, and one thing about the quantum realm is that photons are indistinguishable from each other. There's nothing that can mark one photon as being distinct or individualistic than another one.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting in itself, because if you see one photon, then you're seeing all photons. So it's like Indra's net, where every bit of the phenomena reflects the whole phenomenon. Or it's holographic in that sense. So photons are holographic of the entire universe of light. So you could say the entire universe of light is contained in every photon.
So then, if they're outside of time, then are we looking at no time when we see photons?
Well, if we're looking at it, there's an interaction taking place. But when photons exist as themselves, they're outside of time.
So when we're experiencing them, like we're experiencing photons right now.
Right. We're experiencing, a world outside of time impacting our senses. And that makes the world that we see.
So we have the sense of no time within time.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, you could say that's where the light of our consciousness meets the light of the world. And so we could say, our consciousness doesn't seem to exist in time, and the light that's external to it doesn't exist in time. So is it light meeting light? Is it meeting itself? I don't know.
It seems like a perfect metaphor for what we are in many respects. So if we are light encapsulated, and if at death what encapsulates us is removed, so that we move back again to a place out of time, which is actually the photon traveling at 186,000 miles per hour per second. Excuse me.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't it per second?
Right. So then we are, and if in that state we're all one, we're all intimately connected with every other photon in the universe, so that we re-experience our primal reality as part of the oneness of everything. That metaphor actually explains quite a bit, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and it reminds me of sort of pulses of photons that they've been able to capture in the lab and actually contain them temporarily. Right? They create these photon traps where they'll be able to contain a photon temporarily, take a picture of it. And so maybe our bodies are sort of photonic traps over our lifetimes, where it's temporarily captured and then released again, like a photon trapped in a crystal.
You got to be careful about what you say, or you have people charging the physics labs saying "free the photons."
That's right.
Definitely have to be careful.
I know.
So,
Steve,
I think this brings an interesting question of, is there photonic activity after death? Then it would seem like that would be something that would happen, right?
Well, it could also be why existence after death is so hard to capture. It's very fleeting. Right? It's there and it's gone. Right?
Well, it's in a fundamentally different place, right? It's in a place of no time.
Well, we don't know that, though. Do we know that?
I think we're just assuming it for purposes of this argument, based on what Steve has said about how photons work.
Yeah, but we don't know if photons, do they pass the veil? I mean,
I don't know.
Yeah, the other world or the other realm or the other state of being or non-being or whatever it is.
Right.
So how we envision what that actually is or what it might look like, are photons a part of that?
Good question. I don't know.
I'm just
Well, to me, it makes a lot of sense. In Jewish tradition, they say that the purpose of all our activities